Everybody, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions, and we are continuing with the Sammy Hagar deep dive, looking through every one of Sammy Hagar's solo albums as featured in Red on Black, The Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar. Aha, yes. Thank you very much. That was not planned.
I have
Mr.
it
David
now.
Cretin from Cretin Classics returns. We last saw him on Three Lock Box. And again, spoiler alert, I said this on the Three Lock Box episode. That's my favorite Sammy Hagar album. We're about to talk about my second favorite, Marching to Mars, 1997. I have loved this album since it first came out. I think it's one of Sammy's most personal, heartfelt albums. I think there's a lot of emotion in this album, and rightfully so, based on what had happened. The band he thought he was going to retire in, he was unceremoniously out of the band, however you want to define it. And this was the next thing he put out. So I got this album as soon as it came out. I'm not sure what's your history. What's your history with Marching to Mars?
Same here. We played it a lot in the record store in '97 when it came out, and I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little different, and as we'll discuss, he has a lot of guest musicians on this album, like a lot of guest musicians. I think he really wanted to make the studio into sort of a party atmosphere. However, having said that, this isn't a party album. This is a pretty serious album for Sammy, and I think it's something he had to get out of his system, but I have a hard time being objective with it. I just hear so much heart and soul in this album, and a lot of really great vocal performances. Like, he's really got something to prove here. Unfortunately, this album didn't do very well. It was on a label called Track Factory Records, which was distributed by MCA, and it didn't do anything. I think he only got one video, and but we'll get into the track by track. I know Davey's got a lot of notes. He's always does his homework. He comes prepared. So let's talk about the first track on the album, the first single, Little White Lie.
Well, before we do, I agree with you about what you said. This is 15 years on from the record we did a while back, Three Lock Box. So he's matured. And because of him either leaving or getting fired, whatever happened, just like with Roth, you never really know what happened. He's out of Van Halen. He's making a statement, and this is a much more mature record.
Yeah.
He tried to write, it's not really the dick in the dirt, pardon my French, type lyrics from VOA at all, or his sexual type juvenile songs with Van Halen. This is a serious adult album, and he had something to prove, and he plays a lot of guitar on the record too. He does leads, he does a lot of rhythms, and he wrote every song or co-wrote every song on the record. Yeah. So it's a much more upbeat record. It reached in your home country, it reached number 68 on the charts. In America, it hit number 18, but it never certified gold. Very strange. MCA, the parent company, the Music Cemetery of America, strikes again.
And there you go. There's no justification for Sammy coming off 4 number 1 multi-platinum albums with Van Halen, a gold best of on Geffen, unboxed.
Yes.
And an album that doesn't even go gold is the very next thing he puts out with all of that, behind him, right? Is momentum. So, yeah, I mean, it disappeared. It disappeared. I remember buying this specifically. I bought this album the same time I bought Queensryche's Here in the Now Frontier, which I think is another overlooked gem. And it's just funny. I bought them both at the same time, and neither of them certified. And they were both top 20 albums in the States. Yeah, the fact it charted so low in Canada, that doesn't surprise me. Sammy wasn't much of a touring presence up here. So if you don't tour up here, you just don't get to play, unfortunately. But yeah, Little White Lie was the first single, and it's kind of a statement. The video is a bit on the nose. I don't know how well the video's aged, but I like the song. It's a bluesy little rocker. It's got nice slide guitar. I like the slow build before the drums come in. And when they do come in, it's not a standard 4/4 beat. I think it's a really cool song. It's a short song. It's less than 3 minutes, I think.
That's my problem with it. It's too short, and just as it has the slow build, and it builds up, it kicks in, you get that great Denny Carmassi drum sound, that loud pummeling sound that I loved on the Coverdale Page record when he was with Hart, when he was with Montrose back in the day. So I love his drum sound and his drum playing. I think he's underrated. And Jimmy Page knew how good he was. He had him on the Coverdale Page record.
Yeah.
So he's an undervalued asset to the band and to almost every song he plays on this album. This song was #1 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts for 5 weeks, and it spent a total of 16 weeks on the chart. This was the first single, and in the video, they show a monkey smoking a cigarette, playing guitar. And the song is called Little White Lie. Originally, it was a song he had written when he was in Van Halen about racism, and then he was watching MTV and he saw the brothers trashing him. And he changed the whole lyrical bent of the song to Little White Lie. So that monkey is supposed to represent someone, and I won't say who, but it's pretty obvious. And he was angry and bitter, and it really comes out in this song especially, and maybe a couple of other songs on the record. But it's a good song, but just has that build, and then it kicks in and it fades, it ends. I wanted it to go on longer, but it just has this abrupt ending.
I think that's by design. Like, it just wants to leave you wanting more. I'm not sure where he would have gone with it after that. I know exactly what you mean. It just kicks into that fast drum beat and then boom, and it stops cold. Yeah, I don't know. I love the build though. I mean, it's got a really nice slide guitar in it. Huey Lewis on harmonica. Is this one of the ones that Slash plays on?
Yes, he plays the guitar.
Yeah, I do want to say this. This is getting into this 90s annoying period where you fold out the credits. Some of them are like this. Some of them you got to flip over. I hate it. I just want to read the credits. I just want to know about the songs. But one of the things I do remember really noticing about the credits is that as angry as he was, as hurt as he was, he still thanked Eddie, Alex, Michael, and all the VH fans for 11 wonderful years. So, he was hurting. He was hurting. He never wanted to leave Van Halen. And, my understanding is that Eddie says, yeah, well, we've been working with David Lee Roth. And he's like, it's like finding, your spouse in bed with their ex. It's like, I can't continue in a situation like that. But you're right. Denny Carmassi's drums are fantastic on this. And I do want to say the production is stellar. Mike Klink, of course, there's a Slash connection there. But Mike Klink also produced the 2 new tracks that were on Box, High Hopes and Buying My Way into Heaven. So it's just a nice dry drum sound. It's full, but it's raw. Yeah, I think it's perfect for this material. Really like it.
And the last thing I have to add about this song is Roy Rogers, of all people, plays slide guitar and dobro on this track.
Yeah. And this is the first time of many we'll see this guy named Roy Rogers on a Sammy Hagar album. Now, he is not the old singing cowboy that your folks and grandparents remember. He was named after him. So this guy would have been about Sammy's age. I had to look that up. And I keep seeing this guy, Roy Rogers, and I'm like, well, I know the Roy Rogers I'm thinking of is long dead, but who is this guy named Roy Rogers? He's a blues guitarist and a good one. And he'll pop up a lot. So the next song, this is where it gets really deep. Salvation on Sand Hill. This was written with Sammy Hagar and Damon Johnson, who at the time was in the band Brother Kane. He would go on to play with Alice Cooper. I saw Alice in 2006, and Damon was playing with him. He's also in Black Star Riders.
Yes.
And great vocalist, great singer in his own right, great guitar player, and he co-wrote and played on this song.
I like the loud, soft dynamics here. I like Damon Johnson's solo. More slamming drum work I wrote down from Denny. And it reminds me of Steve Earle's Copperhead Road. It puts me in that mood and mindset.
Yeah, I hear that.
It's sort of like hard rock, but it's country. So it sort of straddles the line.
Yeah, it's very rootsy. But yeah, it does. It's got that. It's that there's not a lot of that there's none of that 80s reverb. It's very dry. And that's, the Steve Earle albums. I think Joe Hardy produced a lot of those, and that's a very similar sound to the ZZ Top albums that he would end up producing. What did I say about Salvation
Brother
on Sand Hill?
Kane,
This is based on a book called Salvation on Sand Mountain by Dennis Covington, and it's about churches that they handle serpents, and they say if you really believe, you stick your hand in there and the snake won't bite and all of that. But you could also say it's got a double meaning, given
yes.
given what happened. But Sammy's vocals on the running for your life, the way he sings that, I mean, guy is 49 going on 50 at this point, and he is just killing it.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out those two Brother Kane records that came out in the early 90s are really good. We used to play those in the record store back in the day.
The first, I'm only familiar with the first one. The first one was great. Like that Got No Shame, That Don't Satisfy Me. Like they got a lot of airplay, but I mean,
same
the
here.
climate was so crappy for traditional rock and roll.
It was changing at the time to grunge.
Yeah.
Back in the early 90s.
Next up is, I think, the one song on this album that wouldn't have sounded out of place on a Van Halen album, as a ballad. Who Has the Right? This was written by Sammy Hagar, Jesse Harms, so his longtime keyboard player is back working with him, and Craig Chiquiso. I had to look this up, but Chiquiso is how you pronounce his name. He was a guitar player in Jefferson Starship and when they morphed into Starship.
Great player, underrated player.
Very much so.
I always thought it was Chiquico, but pronounce it again, please.
Chiquiso.
Chiquiso. Okay.
Yeah, I know that because I read an interview with that Jeb Wright from Classic Rock Revisited did with Craig. I don't know, some years back, and they put his name phonetically, and it was Chiquiso. Unless he's got it wrong, but that's the only time I've ever heard or seen how it's pronounced. Yeah, I mean, listen to Jane by Jefferson Starship. Craig's a fantastic player,
monster player.
So this song, it's a piano ballad, and it's about the death penalty, and it's pretty deep lyrically, and it also has a couple of really good background singers. One I can pick out a mile away, and that's Eric Martin from Mr. Big. But I guess Mickey Thomas sings on this too from Starship. So. Yeah. And he's great too. So, but this is a really, really good song, really heartfelt. I'm surprised they didn't make this a single.
I agree with you. This is a really good song.
Yeah.
And a nice guitar solo from Sammy Hagar on this song.
Yeah, and he's sole credit for guitars. Like, I think, one of the things I wanted to get through with my book is that sometimes you're not really sure who's playing because he's got a second guitar player, but perfectly good guitar player. It's just that he's been constantly surrounded by better guitar players, and he'd be the first to say that.
Yep. But he can solo, and he could write solos, and he had some nice riffs. And his vocals on this song, it's a very serious topic, the death penalty.
Yeah. Killer vocal. That's a bad choice of words. Really, really good. Really, really good. And then he switches it up totally. Next,
left field.
We get a little bit of funk, actually a lot of funk, and some funk cred. Would You Do It for Free? Bass by none other than Bootsy Collins himself. And it's, he's had other songs where he claims to get fun. Even a song like Funky Feng Shui on a later album. It's not really funky, but he has fun doing it. This is a funky song. I mean, the slapping bass, and it's this is another one written with Jesse Harms. This one is another Van Halen inspired song. It's inspired by a conversation he had with Alex Van Halen. Basically, I think I didn't get into much of this in my book because I really wanted to concentrate on the music, but everything kind of went south with Van Halen when their manager, Ed Leffler, died. And then, it was never quite the same after that. But I guess they were really upset about Sammy getting credit for, I think, Eagles Fly, I think One Way to Rock on the Van Halen live album. Well, he wrote those songs and they agreed to do them in concert. So I don't understand why they'd be surprised when he would get the songwriting money for them, because he's the only one that wrote them. So I think
It's
it stems
ego,
from that. I'm not sure, but
ego and
basically at
money.
one point, the question was asked, well, would you do it for free? Well, yeah, I love doing this. So um, it's not direct, but I think that's how it was. I remember reading about this in Metal Edge, and that's what inspired the title anyway.
Okay, and I love that it's so different. This song just comes on. It's like, is this the wrong song from a different album? Is there a mistake in the CD pressing plant? No, it's a funk song with Sammy Hagar, and it's
Yeah.
really good because of Bootsy Collins. And the odd thing that well, not really my friend, my acquaintance and your friend Martin Popoff would say is the last song, "Who Has the Right?" and "Would You Do It for Free?" both have question marks, two question mark songs in a row.
Right.
A little
Yes.
unusual for a record.
Oh yeah, this got all kinds of. I mean, it's got some brackets.
Yep.
uh, well, what would drive Martin nuts is if it had the two question songs in a row. One of them had a question mark and the title one didn't. So, but I mean, Van Halen did that all the time. They'd have
Oh
"Everybody
yeah.
Wants Some," like 3 exclamation points, or "Tora
And the
Tora."
cradle will rock. Dot dot dot.
Yeah,
The
"Tora!"
ellipses. Yeah.
exclamation point, "Tora!" exclamation point. They do the "Women in Love." Dot dot dot. Like, yeah.
But getting back to this song, I think it's a really good deep cut, and I like the backing vocals too. Nice guitar work from Sammy, nice keyboard work from Jesse Harms, and the backing vocals, they do a really good on it underneath the chorus.
Yeah, it's just exactly what a song like this needs. It's a fun turn, and I wasn't expecting it. Um, next up, next up's one of my favorite songs in the album,
Yes.
and even before I knew who was on it, because I listened to it in the car when I first got it. Even before I knew who was on it, I liked this song a lot. But once I realized exactly what was happening, I liked it even more. "Leaving the Warmth of the Womb," within the confines of this Sammy Hagar album, we have a Montrose track. We've got Sammy and Ronnie and Bill Church and Denny Carmassi
Yes.
on a brand new song. And boy, I like this one too. This one's got a lot of that stop start thing, like Salvation on Sand Hill has, and really like it. Really, really like it.
I wrote down that it's a very moody song, and it has a lot of emotion in it, and just great guitar playing from Ronnie Montrose here. And Sammy also plays guitar. He does the rhythms, but
Well,
Ronnie does some great
I
leads.
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. And it was just good to see them working together again. I mean, he'd worked with Danny and Bill, but he and Ronnie reconciled. So, and as we'll get to, they recorded something else too. But
Yes.
we'll stick with the main album for now.
And Denny on the drums on this track. And I wrote down it's another terrific deep album track from the record.
Fantastic. And I just love I love the historical value that you've got a Montrose song on a solo album.
So many years later.
Yeah, and it sounds good. What it does is it just makes me, further think, man, if that lineup could have just stayed together one more out, you know what I mean? Like, history would be totally different, but
Yep.
they had so much, but they had potential to be one of the best bands to come out of the '70s, but just it didn't happen that way. Um, next thing, next one is odd, and I don't mean the song is odd, but it's just an odd trend that was happening in '97, and I wrote about this in this chapter in my book.
Yes.
I bought 3 albums from veteran rockers in 1997 that all had odes to newborn kids. The first one was Motley Crue, "Generation Swine," and it's got that god awful song "Brandon" on it.
Ugh.
That Tommy Lee does. Then Kiss puts out, or officially gets released, "Carnival of Souls," and it's got Paul Stanley singing "I Will Be There" for his son Evan. And on this album, Sammy writes a song about his newborn daughter, Kama. And this is by far the best of those songs. It's a nice
Yes.
ballad. It's a really nice ballad. Um, yeah, there's nothing, you can snicker at it, but I think it's heartfelt, and it's just the guy deserved to have some happiness going on at this point in his life. And what's kind of neat about this, the background vocals, he's got himself and Jesse Harms, Mickey Thomas is back here, and Aaron Hagar, his son, like one of his older kids, is on this.
And he was in the band Bloodline in the early 1990s.
Yeah,
You
wasn't
know that record with Joe Bonamassa, his
I
first
was going to say Joe
performance?
Bonamassa was in that band, but weren't there other people in that band whose fathers were well-known musicians?
Yep, Miles Davis's son was the drummer, and Barry
Right.
Oakley's son was the bass player, and he took over lead vocals once they got rid of Sammy Hagar's son for whatever reason.
Yeah. Okay.
He was in the band Bloodline too. And Joe
Interesting.
Bonamassa, that's where he got his start. I think that album came out in 1991, maybe 1992, around the same time as Brother Kane. Because blues
Yeah,
rock was
that's
still popular then before grunge changed a lot of things.
oh yeah. Yeah. So next up is this one's a really fun one. I get a ZZ Top vibe from this, on the other hand. It's got a Lagrange kind of but
Right.
this is a fun one. It's got, Danny Carmassi, Jonathan Pierce on bass, Damon Johnson's on this again. And this song was based on a conversation that Sammy had with like someone older than him, who basically said, all you need in life are enough friends to count on one hand, because more than that it's just too much of a hassle. But he basically looked at it as, Ray Daniels, world famous manager, managed Rush
Yep.
forever, and um, ended up managing Van Halen. Huge conflict of interest, because he was Alex Van Halen's brother-in-law, because I think they were married to sisters. So that should never have happened. And that led to all kinds, because that's a major conflict of interest, right?
That I
But
did not
anyway,
know.
his way of comparison was like, well, Ray Daniels came along and essentially cut off one of my hands. So yeah, it's interesting to think about this period, because Sammy and Mike weren't even talking. And it was nice when they reconciled, but that's a few albums down the road. Next one's an interesting one. It's kind of a mid-tempo one.
Excuse me, before we go on, I just want to say about On the Other Hand, it's another good song. I like the song, but once again, I have the Little White Lie problem with it.
Oh,
as soon as it starts going,
yeah,
it
it's short.
Fades out. It's too short.
It's very short. It's the shortest song in the album at 2:42.
And it starts fading at about 2:25. It just starts getting lower and lower, and I wanted to hear where it would go, and it just ends.
Yeah, this is the type of song they could have jammed on it longer. But,
too short.
So the next one's Both Sides Now. I like this one. This is a mid-tempo one. It's got like a jangly guitar riff to it, but what I like about this one is that it's more of an optimistic look at how things are going to turn out.
I really like this song. This was the second single from the album. It reached number 11 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts. It stayed there for 20 weeks. It has great melodies, harmonies, nice bass playing by Jonathan Pierce on here. And I love those backing vocals by Hagar and Harms. And I wrote down it's a top tier tune to me from the record.
Yeah.
I really like this song a lot.
Yeah, it's different again. And here we'll talk about MCA. No video. No video.
And there is a video for Kama that I saw, but not for this song. And Kama went nowhere as a single. And
there is a video for Kama?
I saw it on YouTube. I don't know if it's official, but
okay.
It's like he's miming. It's a live performance, but they show other clips. And Vic Johnson, I think his guitar player, his later guitar player, is in the clip, and some other guys that didn't recognize.
Okay, so that's not an official video, because he didn't end up with Vic until the next album.
Years later.
Yeah.
A little while later.
Huh.
But I think really like
this song. Together.
This is one of my favorites from the record.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. Now we switch gears again. For the Yogis, So High, and then in brackets, I'm Stoned. This is a slow, bluesy rocker. And he's basically talking about the difference between being high and being stoned. There's, he said, there's the yogi up on the hill. He's been meditating for years and he's completely high, but naturally, or he's not on anything. So I do like I like the vocals in this. They're very, again, it's got that loud, soft dynamic going on, and it stops and starts. I really like this one. I don't know what more to say about it. It's got blues in it, but it's got attitude, and I really like it.
I'm not a huge fan of spoken word in rock music, and the verses meander a little for my personal taste, but I like the chorus here. But this is a 6-minute song. This one goes on, I think, a little too long compared to the other two shorter songs that I wish were longer. And I prefer the song that did not make the record. That's the same length as this, but we'll get to that after. It's okay, but it's not my favorite.
One of my favorite parts of this song is, he says the difference is, the yogi's so high, but the difference is I'm stoned. But I like how he goes, the difference is, or should I say, the problem is. I like that part. Next up is a song that appeared 2 years earlier, but not on a Sammy Hagar album. It ended up on the Meatloaf album, Welcome to the Neighborhood. Amnesty is Granted. This is the most personal song on the album by far. Definitely. Your thoughts on this one?
It's a good song, and I played the Meatloaf version, and it sounds like Meatloaf. It's on his album, Welcome to the Neighborhood. It was totally written by Sammy, and Sammy sings on it. You could hear Sammy's voice. It's almost a duet when you hear Meatloaf's version, because Sammy's voice just pops out of the speakers, and you say, oh, that's Sammy Hagar singing on the song. Wasn't a single for Meatloaf, but Sammy sings on it and plays guitar, and certain rock stations played it probably because Sammy was on it. And they did it live, but it never charted for Meatloaf. And I really like this song a lot. It's a great riff rocker, more nice bass from Jonathan Pierce that you could hear. And it's about Sammy's freedom from his ex-wife and how he was able to exist then with his new lover once he got divorced. So
I read a totally different story about it. This is a great thing, but my understanding was this was his ex-wife not wanting him to leave and basically saying, come back to me. I don't care what you've done. I'll forgive you. Amnesty is granted. So, but by this time he was, he and Carrie were, well into their relationship, and they're married to this very day. So, so who knows? Either way, it's extremely personal. But
I like both versions, but I think the solo version is better. It's more concise.
After that, like it feels like through all of this, there's been, it starts out Little White Lie, Salvation on Sand Hill, Who Has the Right. Starting with Would You Do It for Free, it starts to lighten up a little bit. Then you get Leaving the Warmth of the Womb. That's darker, but then Came lightens it up. On the other hand, is light musically. Both Sides Now is sort of a change in things. It feels like by the end of the album that he's gone through like what I describe as like a catharsis. Like all of a sudden I don't know, the clouds are gone. The sky, the sun came out again. And that we end with by far the most upbeat, positive song in the album. That's the title song, Marching to Mars, which he co-wrote with Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead. And it's very, very rhythmic and I think very, very cool.
This is one of the highlights to me too. It's a 5-minute song. It has a nice fade up this time. It starts very quiet. It fades up, so that's cool and different. This was the third single from the record. It reached number 3 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts. It was there for 20 weeks. So that's 5 months. That's a long time.
Mainstream rock was a great supporter of this album, the mainstream rock charts.
Yes. 3 songs hit it. Yeah. Nothing on the Hot 100 singles, but the rock radio loved him at the time because he had so many hits with Van Halen throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
That's probably why. So there was a lot of goodwill there. And Sammy plays bass on this song. And he's not as good as Jonathan Pierce, but there's nice bass work and some really good guitar work.
Yeah.
So I like this song a lot. I wrote down it's catchy, upbeat, and it's a happy song. So it ends the album on a happy note after all the trials and tribulations he's gone through.
Yeah. And it's kind of the last time we get this. We never really got this kind of album from Sammy before, and we never really got it again. You know, he started to write in that more serious lyrical thing, I'm going to say, with even something like Mine All Mine off OU812, but certainly on the Balance album, he's writing songs like Feelin' and
love that song.
And Seven Seal, and just but yet on that album he was still writing Wham Bam Amsterdam. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's different. It's a different approach. Unfortunately, I don't think this album's ever been issued on vinyl. I wish it would be. I've got a cassette, which is the only other format I could find of it. But
no 8-track?
No 8-track. Imagine that.
In 97.
Well, anyway, although there is more to talk about because, as is often the case, the Japanese market gets a little bit extra. And my understanding is the reason for that has always been, for some reason, it's cheaper to buy imports in Japan than it is to buy domestic. So they always want to make sure there's something on the domestic that makes people buy not the import version. It's just the opposite, because then everybody else around the world wants the Japanese versions, right? And the Japanese version of Marching to Mars has 2 extra tracks. One of them is not really a song. It's more of an introduction called Ether. And it kind of sounds like the title, sound effects. If you can imagine, like, going under and getting a mask put over you to put you to sleep for an operation, that's kind of the feeling you get from this Ether track. But the other song is quite good, and as you mentioned, quite long, and I wish it was on the main album, Wash Me Down Again. What do you think about this one?
It's the Japanese only bonus track that I really like, and I wrote down I like this better than the Yogi Is So High. And I'm not sure about the instrumentalist, but I think it's Sammy on guitar, definitely vocals, probably guitar. And by the sound of the keyboards, it sounds like Jesse Harms because he co-wrote the song. And the bass playing sounds like Jonathan Pierce. And I'm not sure who's on drums because the drums don't sound as slamming as Denny Carmassi. And I like the keyboard work. There's a nice keyboard solo in the middle of the song. I wrote down it's upbeat, rollicking, and it's a rocking song. So maybe he thought that it didn't fit the texture and the tone of the overall album, and that's why it's not on there. But it's a really good 6-minute song. I highly recommend it. It's on YouTube if you want to check it out.
Yeah.
Wash Me Down Again.
I wonder if it's, if it was one of the first things that he came up with for this album.
It's an interesting slant.
It's hard to tell how these decisions are made, what makes the main album, what doesn't. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. And there's another song we mentioned back when we were talking about Leaving the Warmth of the Womb. While the original Montrose was in there, they jammed out a live version of Rock Candy off the floor. How do you compare this version to the original Montrose version?
Well, I wrote down, was this necessary? No. But is it fun? Yes. And it's them jamming out a longer version. It's 5.5 minutes. Sammy flubs up on the lyrics and they kept it in there. So it's definitely not on the record because it's too much fun. And it shows Sammy having fun. He's laughing. He said, "Oh, you changed it up on me." Ha, ha, ha. Something to that effect. So I like this version, but it's not going to replace the original. But he does do a good scream on it. He still sounds good on it on the vocals. And this is so many years later. What's it, 24 years later?
Crazy. Yeah. And now here we are, like, that and more since this album.
Yeah, 27 years since then.
Yeah. So this version of the song, obviously you can find it on YouTube, but it was this song and Ether appeared on the CD single to Little White Lie. Unfortunately, Wash Me Down Again does not seem to have appeared on any singles, so you have to get the Japanese CD if you want a physical copy of that song. So yeah, I've this very quickly became a favorite of his albums. And yeah, I think I only prefer Three Lock Box to this. I just think this is a really, really strong, we said it's 27 years old, still a latter day Hagar album post Van Halen. And I think it holds up really, really well. Would love to see a vinyl
So do I.
reissue of it. I'd like to see just, another uh more focus put back on this album because it didn't do as well as it should have. It should have at least gone gold. I don't understand that. Like this one and Red Voodoo should have gone gold. They were still major label albums, but again, they were both on MCA.
Yep.
So,
That's the one with Mass Tequila, right? Mass Tequila.
yeah, yeah. So
that was a big hit too.
yeah,
A lot of airplay.
MCA, man.
Music
Check out Rock Day
America.
Dream Nation with Pete, my good friend Peter Kerr, and he had Davey on as a guest, and they talked about several albums on MCA that probably should have done better than they did. And here we are in the 90s and nothing's changed.
Go figure.
So, and be sure and subscribe. Cretin Classics too, by the way. He's always got great content, works very hard, does a lot of research. So
thanks.
If you hear something on...
And Tim's going to be on my channel next year, early next year. Tim will be on Cretin Classics.
Awesome. And if you hear something, if he tells you a fact about something, he's looked it up. He's verified. It's factual. So remember, folks, Red on Black, Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar. Thanks to everybody that's purchased the book. We are not done with the Hagar deep dive. This is phase 2 of Sammy's solo career, and it's just getting started. So we're going to keep on going with it. So I'll have the link posted below. Davey, thank you for doing this. And I just want to listen to this album. This makes me want to listen to this album talking about the songs.
Really good record. Highly recommended.
See y'all later on Tim's Final Confessions. Go listen to Marching.